In today's episode, we're going to talk about hip interrotation. So this is mobility for your hip mobility. We're going to do one for interrotation and one for external rotation. There will be a mini series to this. So this is a follow-on routine. So apart from the full body mobility routine that we should be doing, we're going to be starting off with the hip cars. So again, lying on the side here. So we're doing side lying hip cars. So bring into flexion, out into the side, internally rotate to the back. Coming to the back, bring it all the way to the front. Again, bring it to the front, to side, all the way to the back. And then same thing with the other side. So we want to obviously warm up our hips before doing any sort of mobility training, because mobility training is a strength training aspect. So we're just warming up our hip here, on the right side, right here. And obviously you might hear some clicks, and that's completely normal. Usually, the more mobility training that you do, the less deficits or less clicks you will hear. But obviously, it's part of our joints functioning well. So yeah. So this is our hip mobility warm up. So we're going to be utilizing our 90-90 base. So for the hip internal rotation, what that means is we're in our 90-90 base like this. So what that means is our left leg is in 90 degrees position and your right leg is in 90 degrees position. It's gonna vary for everybody because everybody doesn't have some sort of same thing in terms of movement. So if your leg can't go into 90 degrees, that's completely fine. You can come in like this, but typically we want it in a 90 position. Or if people find it too challenging, this base, which can be for some people, if you find it really, really tight in the hips, you can always elevate yourself. So finding like a yoga block would actually help a lot. So you're an elevated surface. So for example, you're all the way up here. For some people, maybe up here. For some people, maybe down here. Typically, we want to be in a nice neutral pelvic position. So we don't want to be slouched over most of the time. So we want to be up into this upright position. So for this base, we are going into 90 position as you see here. So think of the pelvis is turning back. So when this is pelvic tilt, you want to put your pelvis all the way to the back so you're sitting on that base so that you avoid any tilt. So obviously for some people there might be limitations and that's completely fine. You just want to work in your pain-free ranges of motion. So for mobility training, we want to be in a stretch for about 30 seconds to a minute. For some people who have the time, you can go up to 2 minutes long. That's completely fine. So essentially you're sitting in this base and feeling that stretch in that hip. And actually for the internal rotation, you're actually rotating toward both sides. So this is going to be the base for our internal rotation. So you're just going to turn over your torso to the side where you can feel the stretch in both your hips, and actually the right hip that we're focusing on. Okay? So we're going to do a 1 minute passive stretch into this position. In terms of breathing, you want to make sure that you're breathing in, breathing out. Just maintain a good rhythm, and you just want to maintain that good breathing pattern, right? So while we're in this base position, I'm going to go over some of the pails and rails cues. Okay, so obviously with the hand, you might be wondering where to put your hands. What's the hand placement? Typically, we want to place it behind, but not slouch all the way behind. So for some people, if you feel like too much of a limitation, you can always adjust it by putting your hands behind. Or if you're on a yoga block, obviously that's going to make it much easier, but you don't want it to be super easy to the point where it's easy to do the exercise, right? So with this, the internal rotation, we're in a internally rotated base. Pails, we're going to go through what that is. So pails, you're obviously inserting force up into the arm. So we're placing our arm up on that right knee over here and driving that knee up in towards our arm. So almost like this movement. So think of that driving in toward the arm. But obviously this is an isometric. So you're not using any weights, you're just using our own body weight and body control. So what this is going to teach us is to using our tissues and lines of muscles of tissues to help control the range of motion, right? So for pails, you're driving up in toward that arm. And then for rails, you don't want to get into the rails right away, but essentially you're trying to lift that leg up off the ground, but obviously you're not able to. If you're able to, you're not in a end range position. You're not in a deep stretch. So obviously for this, you don't see anything happening at all. But mind you, for the rails contraction, you might feel a little cramp in the outer glute right here and possibly along the hamstring, and that's completely normal. That's part of the mobility training. You might feel a little bit sore, but if you're feeling too sore, just back out of the range of motion. You don't want to be in any sort of discomfort for this, okay? So we're gonna go through round 1. So I'm gonna go through 3 rounds with you guys on each side, just internal rotation. So we're 30 seconds into the stretch. So obviously you'll be counting in towards your timer. You don't need to do like a full 2 minutes if you don't have too much of a time, but just getting into the stretch, right? So for the pales contraction, we are going to drive up, and then rails contraction again, you're just trying to lift this ankle up off that floor. So you're gonna really feel that in your outer glute. Ready? In 3, 2, 1. I'm starting at 10% effort, 20% effort, 30% effort, 40% effort. Mind you, for some people, it's gonna be different. I'm able to go up to 80% effort, 90% effort. For beginners, go up to 30% effort. Ready? In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then try to maintain that ankle, try to get it up off the ground. But obviously you won't be able to, but you're utilizing a lot of these muscle tissues. And you're trying to lift this ankle. Imagine there's a weight underneath and it's reading 0 pounds. Trying to lift that off. 5, 3, 2, 1, and relax. So from this first round, you'll see how challenging it is because we're using our strength, right? For the second round, I want you to get deeper into that stretch. What that means is we're gonna be turning our body. So if you're on the yoga block, we'll be turning slightly to the right to feel a deeper stretch in our hip muscles. Okay? So we're gonna be relaxing to the stretch for another minute or so, or 45 seconds. I'm gonna be timing it. Just relaxing to that stretch here. Breathe in. And then deep breath out. So for this one, we're staying to that stretch and try to keep that body position as straight as possible. We tend to lean and slouch over, but we want to make sure we're focusing on the hip entire time, not anywhere else. Okay. So for the second round, again, pales contraction, going up to the arm, rails, trying to lift this off the ground. 3, 2, 1, 10% effort, 20, 30, 40, 50, 70, 80, 4, 3, 2, 1. Trying to lift this up, rails. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Another 5 seconds, I lied. I didn't even do a whole 10 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax. So notice that this can be challenging, especially if you haven't ever trained this. You might feel this right in your glutes here, and that's completely normal because like these are ranges that we never really train in our daily lives. And hip internal rotation is probably one of the things that like most people lack of. And that's why most people get like knee problems. If you've seen on my Instagram that, you know, most people get knee problems, is because their rotation of their hip is not addressed. And we want to train this rotation of our hip before we address other parts of the body. So that's why this is the most important video that you'll ever be watching and you'll ever carry in your daily life. Okay, so for those people who want to do another round, for all my advanced people, we'll go for another round. But for all our beginners, intermediate, just stick to 2 rounds and switch over on the other side. So you can fast forward the video to the next couple minutes. So obviously we're gonna be going for a 3rd round here. In 3, 2, 1, pushing our hip up. 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Try to lift that up. 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax. Now this obviously can be really challenging. Even for me, it's one of the most challenging things that I usually train. But for this hip internal rotation, I do it once a week, and I recommend all of you actually do it once a week in your training. Incorporate it in your training, whether it's your mobility day or even before your squat or before pre-game, as a quick way to activate those muscles, right? So we're backing out of this range of motion. Now we're going to lift-offs. So what this lift-offs is, for internal rotation, we can bring this left leg in closer and focus on that right leg, trying to lift off. So obviously for this, we want to be lifting off just a couple centimeters off. So if you find that you're lifting off like too much, that's going to be too easy for you. So if you see a couple centimeters off and down. And with the body position for this one, you want to be upright. You don't want to be slouching over while you're doing it. So you want to focus right at that hip. So for some of you, it could be down here to make it easier. Or some of you, it could be here, right? Obviously, if you're at a yoga block, you know, you have that range of motion. So obviously, if you find it too challenging, you can always raise yourself on a yoga block and sit on it and then raise, right? Okay. So we're gonna be doing 10 lift-offs, and at the very last lift-off, we're gonna be holding that. So we're gonna be contracting the entire muscles the entire time, right? So 3, 2, 1, lift off. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Hold. 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax.